It is a sad present for humanity. A gigantic black tower with 100 floors has appeared in the city center and has been continuously rising. Until this moment, the human race was not aware of how dangerous this situation could become. At first, everyone was curious, as the tower did not seem to pose a major threat but rather a certain discomfort. However, humans soon realized that the feeling of peace was false and the danger of the extinction of their species was imminent. They called it the apocalypse, and others called it the catastrophe. In both cases, it was the end of the world. On television, all news channels talked about this paranormal event. Finally, the news had something worth talking about. One day, the tower issued a challenge to humanity, asking them to respond to a message that read, "If you want to stop the downfall of humanity, answer the tower's message." From that moment on, the human race divided into two parts: those who cowardly fled as far away as possible, believing it to be the escape and the best alternative, and on the other hand, the brave ones who chose to defend humanity at all costs. The second group was baptized as the Tower Walkers. This group of people armed themselves with as many weapons as possible, from swords to spiked balls, long-range and short-range weapons. They created custom-made armor with whatever they could find to protect their bodies as best as possible. And so, without being mentally or physically prepared, they waged a war to the death against the tower. This group of brave individuals unleashed brutal battles on each floor of the tower, putting their lives at risk in every battle. As they ascended, more powerful monsters attacked them, and the casualties grew. Exhaustion and fear began to take their toll. Suddenly, a celestial crystal appeared before the human fighters. This object was called the regression crystal, and its magical power was peculiar and almost convenient for this moment. You see, if humans decided to take the crystal, it would transport them back to the past, leaving behind the cruel present they were living, far from failure and extermination. 6 Tower Walkers fought tirelessly, and now there seemed to be a momentary pause in the appearance of monsters. But it was a suspicious pause, as the regression crystal conveniently appeared before them. The humans looked at it in awe. It was as if the tower wanted them to use it and stop ascending further floors. One of them took the crystal to see if its effects were really what they expected. As he closed his fist around the artifact, the body of this walker disintegrated into thin air. The rest were completely alarmed by what had happened. He had vanished into thin air without a trace. But on the other hand, if the regression crystal had truly fulfilled its effect, the affected human would find themselves in a better place, in a better past. Suddenly, a monster attacked one of the walkers, incapacitating him. This immediately generated panic in 2 other walkers who, without thinking for another second, grabbed the regression crystal, clutched it tightly, and decided to return to the past. Now, only 2 humans remained, who refused to take the easy way out and fought against the beasts, managing to clear the floor they were on. The 2 remaining men continued their fight for humanity, ascending the tower in the face of the adversities it had prepared for them. After a successful battle against a mutant creature with red eyes and a fire tongue, the man who stood tall thanks to his sword and his companion turned around to look for the other. His companion was Yunhwan, lying against a corner on a wall that threatened to collapse at any moment. Yunhwan held a regression crystal in his left hand, ready to be used to leave behind the horrifying present they had to endure. Yunhwan approached him and, noticing that he was gravely injured, decided to show mercy and let him go, or rather, let him return to the past where he could possibly live a different life in a different reality. Now everything depended on Yunhwan, who opened the door to the 99th floor, a floor no human had managed to reach alone until this moment. A wintry breeze struck him as the 99th floor was covered in snow, with hail falling from above. Yunhwan entered the place with a determined attitude. On his sides, swords of fallen warriors in this area watched him as he approached the center of the room. Now, a monster, at least 15 times his size, appeared before him, roaring furiously and indicating that a battle to the death would soon begin, perhaps deciding the future of the human race. As Yunhwan unsheathed his sword and took a combat stance with utmost concentration, someone observed him from a distance, from somewhere impossible to decipher. It was a demon with black skin, blue eyes and gums, and long, sharp fangs, relishing the idea of harvesting a new product. He referred to Yunhwan, whom he had been observing all this time. But to know the true intentions of this mysterious being, we must wait a little longer. Now, we must go back in time to understand more about the events. It is a normal day where birds sing happily. The sun shines in the clear, sky-blue sky. In a small store, a hooded figure takes a bag of snacks that came defective from the factory. The contents start spilling onto the floor due to a tear in the package. The man crouches down to try to pick up the food that has scattered on the floor, and a little girl, His younger sister accuses him of being a thief, believing that his true intention was to break the package and eat the chips without paying for them, something the hooded man instantly denies. The store's television can be heard in the background. The news channel is reporting a small dust storm that is hindering visibility in the city. Then, a tremor is felt beneath their feet. The television indicates that a small magnitude earthquake has occurred in the Seoul neighborhood, but it has had an aggressive gradual progression that still persists. The snack guy manages to stand up and approaches two other customers who were in the store, looking out the window, surprised by what was happening. The ground vibrates more and more strongly and slowly begins to crack. Something emerging from the depths of the earth begins to push outward. Suddenly, a large black circle emerges on the surface of the planet Earth and violently rises towards the sky. The hooded man, whom we have previously met during the introduction, Jaehwan, embraces his younger sister and runs as fast as possible in the opposite direction of the structure that continues to emerge from the ground. Jaehwan, who becomes our protagonist, finds refuge in a nearby warehouse with other citizens who had also escaped from the scene. Everyone is intrigued and absorbed by the building that had sprung from the ground and now had stopped. A tower with black walls and a spectral appearance had appeared in front of humanity, in this case in front of the people of Seoul. But they were not the only ones affected. This was happening globally. For example, in England, one of these towers had also appeared. Far away from there, returning to the Asian continent, we could see that Japan had suffered the same fate. Thus, many major cities around the world had one of these unidentified towers, which at the moment only generated rumors and various hypotheses among humans. People began to call these towers different names around the world, such as the Tower of Apocalypse, Catastrophe Tower, and even Nightmare Tower. For a while, nothing changed in people's lives until a small rectangular orange screen appeared in front of each human with a message that required a response from each individual. The message said, "Congratulations, you have been nominated as a Tower Walker who will save the world. Will you fulfill the call?" And this question, on the same screen, could be answered with two obvious choices, accept or reject. The humans around the world who selected the option to accept were immediately transported to the interior of their respective country's tower or the nearest one if there was none. Inside each tower, they appeared in the battle zone, and as if it were a role-playing video game or RPG, they received what was called the system's blessing, which consisted of a pack of weapons and armor, magic spell books, and even gold coins. Soon, the battlefield inside the tower began to fill with people who had bravely or skeptically responded to the tower's call, minimizing the seriousness of the situation. They all looked at each other without fully understanding what was happening. Suddenly, images appeared on screens on the walls of the tower that seemed familiar to some of the humans inside. Families having dinner in their homes, workers carrying out tasks, others curiously looking towards the tower full of curiosity. It seemed that the images were showing life outside the tower, the outside world, those people who had rejected or not responded to the call. In Seoul, there was no exception. The situation was the same regarding the whole world. Outside the Apocalypse Tower, a group of construction workers were already working to repair the surrounding area where the tower had emerged, while the government or higher authorities would take care of the necessary investigation. Suddenly, about 20 floors away, a figure materializes through an opening that clearly was not human. It appeared to be a woman, but instead of 5 fingers, she had 5 sharp claws that could be seen from a distance. This figure caught the attention of everyone around. But the terror begins when she aggressively leaps into the void, causing panic among the crowd. Screams could be heard, indicating that authorities should be called as the approaching shadow seemed dangerous. But what was truly terrifying and dangerous was what followed. Dozens of monsters of all kinds began descending from the tower. With different colors, shining eyes, sharp teeth and claws, and varying sizes, they wreaked havoc in the city, decimating the human race. The military force quickly arrived with soldiers and tanks, ready to attack these abominations and put an end to this madness. However, they tragically failed in their attempt. Their weapons were not powerful enough, and they were outnumbered in terms of troops. Within minutes, the human race fell before this formidable enemy, and the Earth suffered a reduction of 1/3 of its global population. The images were transmitted on the interior walls of the Apocalypse Tower, where the inhabitants of Seoul expressed themselves in various ways. Some shed tears, covering their mouths in astonishment. Others displayed bursts of anger and a desire to ascend the tower and liberate the planet. The humans who had accepted the tower's call now equipped themselves and organized to ascend within it and reach the end of this ordeal. They didn't know what they were facing, but their sole objective was to advance until the end, hoping that teamwork could triumph over evil. They attacked the first floor and defeated the monsters that gathered before them while defending a stone wall. Upon reaching it, some humans believed they couldn't progress any further. However, through sheer force, others began attacking the colossal stone. The result was the opening of a hole through which the humans could pass and continue their journey. But before this, one of them noticed a celestial crystal had fallen from the wall they had demolished, now radiating with intense brightness. A screen opened before them above the crystal, displaying another message from the tower. This time, it described the functionality of this recently discovered artifact. As it turned out, this crystal possessed the magical property of sending the user back in time. Specifically, it would return them to the exact moment they were summoned by the tower back to the battlefield. The crystal also allowed users to retain memories of their previous experiences. Knowledge was not lost. The group fighting for the good of humanity had self-dubbed themselves Tower Walkers. Their leader, Inchun, volunteered to verify if this artifact truly worked or not, as he found it highly suspicious. So, Inchun became the first brave soul to test it. Although some might see him as a coward trying to escape, it depends on one's perspective. The leader disappeared into thin air, leaving behind a small, glowing particle. Everyone stared at it, still uncertain whether this disappearance was real or if the leader could return if desired. Among the group of Tower Walkers was Sakamoto, who had been a science teacher before the world went to hell. This teacher explained that if Inchun had successfully returned in time, there would be no way for him to cross paths with them again, as he had branched off into a parallel timeline. The rest of the walkers looked at him, not fully grasping his language, but understanding enough to realize they wouldn't see him again. Sakamoto corrected that notion, saying that if the famous string theory was indeed true, there was a certain possibility that each human could return to a different past, and perhaps some of them would cross paths in another timeline. However, nothing was certain, as there was no way to verify it without using the crystal. Outside, the tower caused another jolt for the human race, releasing hundreds of monsters at once, aiming to further reduce the remaining population. Inside, the walkers experienced anxiety and confusion. Now they doubted whether it was best for them to stay in the tower and die while trying to give their lives for humanity, or go back to the past in another timeline where they could potentially rebuild their lives. Perhaps happier, but starting from scratch. Choosing to leave was the easier way out. The walkers started to disappear, leaving their brilliance suspended in the air after using the regression crystal. Many more decided to leave than to stay and fight. Only one red-haired boy remained in the room, kneeling before what he possibly considered a betrayal by all his comrades, abandoning the present timeline and disregarding what remained of humanity. Suddenly, a demon appeared before him, taking the form of a giant worm. It opened its mouth, ready to engulf the young redhead, revealing hundreds of teeth and tentacles that resembled whiskers. The human simply lowered his head, prepared to surrender to his fate. But today was his lucky day. Behind him, the sound of two swords being unsheathed could be heard, followed by a human leaping at the giant worm, cutting as many pieces of flesh and tentacles inside it as possible. After this act of bravery and saving the surrendered youth's life, the man stood before him, his green eyes fixed on him, and with a smile, he asked if he was all right. Many humans, with serious appearances and seemingly better prepared than the cowards who had fled moments ago, began to arrive behind him. One of the men from this group thanked the red-haired teenager for holding on until the end. Now, this young man had a different perspective on the Tower Walkers. The last hope of humanity wasn't the one who took the crystal to flee to the past. The last hope of humanity was the one who stayed to defend the present. The new walkers have advanced and have now come across another conflicted human, whom they gladly helped. A monster with a black cloak, orange face, and wizard hat was stalking him, ready to take his life. So the man with green eyes and his leader Jaehwan lunged at it and quickly dispatched it, cutting it into pieces within seconds. Another life saved. After the battle on this floor, they wonder if they should mourn any losses, but that's not the case. The rest of the group raises their fists and extends their thumbs up, indicating that everything is fine. There are only minor injuries among them, and one of the walkers in the group, who has healing abilities, is already tending to them. Jaehwan gets excited and believes that they can reach the end of the tower if they continue at this pace. Jaehwan, on the other hand, examines the floor where the monster perished and finds a sword. But not just any sword. According to the orange informative plaque provided by the tower, this weapon was called the Dragon Suppressor Sword. Its history claimed that it had been forged for 1,000 days by the Phantom Tiger to permanently eliminate a dragon. The protagonist looks at the sword and realizes that it is a powerful weapon. He agrees with his friend Yunwon's stance and believes that they are capable of reaching the end of the tower. They all leave floor 85. The group of walkers continues to ascend inside the tower without much difficulty, and without suffering any further casualties. But just when everything seems to be going in their favor, floor 98, also known as the Purgatory Chamber, plays a trick on them. A demon of unprecedented size appears, with unbreakable skin like rock and capable of spitting lava, which also emanates from its body. It surprises the walkers. During the course of the battle, everyone except Yunwon and Yiwen loses their lives, but the two of them continue fighting until the end. This time, the protagonist is the most injured. He has received a powerful blow, causing his body to crash against the ground and become embedded, making it impossible for him to escape on his own. While the guardian of this chamber locks his intense red eyes onto the protagonist, memories of his friends from recent times pass through his mind. They had shared so many battles and so much time together, only to die so close to the summit. It truly is a disappointment. The monster approaches the protagonist, determined to finish him off. But at the most critical moment, when Yiwen can do nothing else, Yunwon lands on the attacker's head and begins cutting at it. Yiwen is astonished to see his friend risking his life to save him. Now, Yunwon urgently asks him to recover as he cannot defeat the beast alone. But the protagonist doesn't react. His body is incapable of fighting. The attacks from the green-eyed youth continue, annoying the guardian of Purgatory, who hasn't forgotten his main prey and now seems to want to focus on the man standing on his head. Yunwon takes a big leap in the air, gripping his sword with both hands as he falls, aiming for the enemy's brain to pierce its skull and end the fight. But despite the demon's large and slow nature, it manages to anticipate the young man's intentions, turning at the exact moment, and using its horn as a landing spot for Yunwon. The walker drops his sword and becomes impaled near the demon's jaws. Yiwen screams with all his might, releasing all the pent-up anger he feels from witnessing his friend being massacred. He gathers his strength to finish off the demon. The enemy smashes its own face against a nearby wall, slamming Yunwon's body against it and leaving him lying motionless on the ground. Not knowing exactly where he finds the strength, the protagonist receives a surge of energy and launches himself with the last of his strength at the demon's back, cutting with his swords along its spine. The monster falls defeated. Seemingly its weak point has been discovered by chance, but the important thing is that the battle is over. Yiwen runs desperately to the area where his friend was crashed and finds his lifeless body, possibly taking his last breaths. Yunwon looks at him, holding a small piece of crystal in his hand, which suggests his plan is to return to the past and leave the present behind. This disappoints Yiwen, who turns away and decides to leave Yunwon to his fate. This attitude among the walkers could be seen as a kind of betrayal. Yiwen walks away toward floor 99 of the tower. Meanwhile, Yunwon realizes that the fragment of crystal in his hand is worn out and he won't be able to return to the past. He stands up and begins to walk very slowly toward the balcony on floor 98, where the sunset can be seen. In his thoughts, he is filled with gratitude for his friend, who is giving everything for the human race. The young man feels proud and at peace to have Yiwen in that world. He has full confidence that Yiwen will make it to the top. Now Yunwon, nicknamed the Smiling Knight by the other walkers because he never lost his smile throughout the ascent of the tower, leaps from the balcony of floor 98, putting an end to his suffering. The protagonist has just climbed the stairs and finally reaches the entrance to floor 99. Before opening it, he takes a moment to think about the faces of all those he left behind, whom he could have called friends until a moment ago. He decides to carry the pain of not being able to bid farewell to each of them. Now everything is in his hands. He opens the door and a freezing blizzard hits his face. The room is a frozen field. Upon setting foot in this room and closing the back door, he manages to walk a few meters forward before being ambushed by the guardian of this floor, who surprises him by shooting a ball of energy in a sky blue color, matching the surroundings. Yiwen dodges this attack with a great leap and then, from the height, he looks down at the floor where ice scales start forming. The enemy and guardian of this floor is a giant frozen monster that easily conceals itself in the snow. The monster reveals itself, showing its horrible face covered in frost. This enemy has the ability to communicate in the same language as humans and ironically asks if he has not given up yet. Yiwen, with his right forearm frozen, mocks the monster, asking if it has grown tired of playing. The monster reacts by diving into the snow, disappearing from the protagonist's sight. Ewan takes advantage of this moment to escape and take refuge in an icy cave. He heals his frozen wound with a potion he crafted thanks to the experience he gained in battles within the tower. Meanwhile, he thinks that the difficulty of this floor is incomparable to the rest of the tower. The ice dragon named Velchus possesses a breath attack of ice that is impossible to withstand for any living being. In fact, the protagonist attributes his survival to the equipment he obtained from the bodies of the other walkers eliminated throughout this journey. Ewan mainly misses Han Soil, a woman he could have saved if only he had been a little braver. She left him her Flame King's bracelet, one of the 3 most powerful pieces of equipment he currently possesses. The story is interrupted by a blacksmith named Jay. He approaches the protagonist, wondering if he is daydreaming, and asks if he is thinking of challenging that floor again. Ewan nods and says he believes that this time he will defeat it. We find ourselves in Atopos, a village claimed by the human race within the tower, specifically on level 50. This territory was won by defeating the guardian of this floor, Ultiminus. It can be said that this territory was and still is a kind of base for the human race, where priests heal the wounded who come from battles and blacksmiths forge new tools and weapons useful for the walkers. It is the place where people did not lose hope and continued fighting despite all odds. But many years have passed since the glory days of this city. Today, there was only one blacksmith left, Jay. That blacksmith had only one customer, our protagonist. Now these two are gathered in the blacksmith's shop, discussing the major problem with supplies. Time is passing, and nothing is coming from the lower floors. Ewan indicates that this is due to 2 reasons. First, the supplies are starting to run out. And second, there are no new people in the tower anymore. The apocalyptic tower has been hit a total of 10 times since its appearance, most likely wiping out the entire human race outside. Jay prefers to change the subject and asks the protagonist if he has seen anything new on any of his recent trips. He responds that in the place where they found the stone hiding the regression crystal, there was an inscription engraved on the wall that he has not been able to decipher yet. The message read, "Tower within a tower, nightmare within a nightmare." On the other hand, something that caught Ewan's attention was the disappearance of Hyleen, the village's grandmother. He is very worried because there are only 2 support-type walkers, herself and Jay. The grandmother's disappearance unsettles the protagonist, who thinks that the same could happen to his friend, the blacksmith. Therefore, he asks if Jay is capable of teaching him the art of blacksmithing. The flashback comes to an end, and we return to the snowy territory where Ewan is about to engage in one of the worst and most challenging battles of his life. The ice dragon challenges him to fight without hiding, as it is confident that he cannot clear the floor alone, something that no one has been able to achieve. Ewan invites Velchus to see for himself that he will be able to clear it. Now the protagonist provokes the dragon's anger by saying that his ice armor is beginning to crack, which will be very useful in the battle. Velchus becomes furious at the hero's observation, as touching his armor is also touching his pride. So, he launches an attack, charging his breath attack in his throat. The ice dragon spits out its technique, directly hitting the protagonist and causing him to crash into a cluster of spiky ice. Within it, faces and bodies of several fallen combatants can be seen. Velchus tells his opponent that he will die alone if he continues fighting against him. The protagonist starts feeling the frozen hands of the dead warriors, who begin touching him and trying to drag him into the ice with them. Then, cold whispers murmuring his name can be heard. Ewan gathers courage and with a surge of determination from an unknown source, he frees himself from the voices and hands and launches a direct attack. Velchus laughs at the pushing movement chosen by his rival to attack, saying that it won't be enough. As Ewan approaches with his sword, intending to strike the dragon with his push, he begins to remember events from the past. The protagonist hadn't managed to start climbing the tower at the same time as the first walkers. This set him apart from the rest in terms of weapons, equipment, and hidden races. The same applied to abilities. Ewan focused solely on perfecting one, the push. With his signature ability, he managed to eliminate over 50,000 monsters throughout his time in the tower. As it was extensively practiced, it eventually acquired the power equivalent to a hidden ability. In addition to the above, the push ability was physical, so it didn't consume his spiritual power, and thus the protagonist never grew tired. Now, as his memory ends and we see him back in battle, he approaches the dragon who is preparing his freezing breath attack to destroy the protagonist. Ewan arrives first with his pushing attack and manages to strike the monster's cheek. Ewan smiles, confident that his signature ability has damaged his opponent, hitting him near his eye where he should feel the most pain. But to his surprise, Velchus hasn't even noticed the blow. It was like a mosquito bite. The protagonist steps back, intending to launch his attack once more, but realizes that his enemy's ability is already sufficiently charged to be unleashed, and he doesn't feel capable of withstanding another attack like that. Jaehwan seems defeated in the face of his rival, but in a stroke of fate or coincidence, a light illuminates a specific part of Velches's body. The protagonist remembers something related to this that had happened to him on the previous floor while fighting in purgatory. When his surge of anger drove him to launch himself against his rival with little hope, a light illuminated a specific spot on the demon he was fighting, and it made him decide to attack exactly at that point, leading to the enemy's defeat. Without further hesitation, Jaehwan quickly uses his pushing attack, hitting the illuminated spot on the ice dragon, specifically at the junction of its upper and lower lips. Velches's roars in pain and momentarily loses balance, halting his attack. It wasn't enough to defeat him, but the protagonist understands that he hit the mark. Now, the ice dragon ascends into the air, spreading its wings and spewing freezing rays all over the area. Jaehwan runs and avoids each of them until he stumbles and falls to the ground. The enemy descends and stands before him. Velches's taunts his rival, saying that he is not powerful enough to defeat him, but perhaps 10 humans like him could put an end to him. He also confesses that the humans fell into the trap by using the Dream Demon's stone. Jaehwan opens his eyes, astonished by what he hears. He swiftly turns on his axis and escapes the room by jumping, narrowly avoiding the dragon's claws that almost tear him to pieces. After leaving the room, he closes the door, and the phrase from Velches's remains engraved in his mind, stating that the humans had been deceived by the Dream Demon's stone. Now we witness a leap of 5 years, during which the protagonist has reached the peak of all his abilities. He has become the strongest human inside and outside the tower. Once again, he insists on defeating Velches's, and to his surprise, he succeeds in annihilating him once and for all. The great ice dragon, who had probably never believed that a human could pose a threat to him, begins to disappear, leaving behind a black aura. From it emerges a sword that the protagonist takes, possibly the most powerful weapon in the entire tower, at least until that moment. On the other hand, black particles start floating in the air, forming the number 100, beneath which appears a door. Jaehwan understands that it is the path to the final decisive floor of the tower, so, without hesitation, he enters to put an end to this nightmare once and for all. The hero of this story has entered floor number 100, prepared for whatever awaited him inside. Or at least that's what he believed. The room remained dark, with nothing to see until some flashes in front of him put him on alert. Screens displaying images of various places as if they were security cameras appear before his eyes. One of them shows a topos, for example, and another shows the innovation zone, where all the humans who agreed to defend the Earth appeared for the first time. Now a voice resounds in the room, causing the protagonist to draw his sword and remain on guard. The voice admits that it expected Jaehwan to return to the village before accessing the final floor. It also tells him not to worry and to stay calm, as there was still a message it forgot to show him when he entered the room. The characteristic orange screen message materializes, congratulating the protagonist for completing the tutorial. The protagonist's expression changes completely after reading the word tutorial. It is obvious that he never expected that everything he had experienced up to this point was just the beginning of something much bigger. Although he wasn't sure if this was real, worry took hold of him. After this, the voice that was a mystery until a moment ago presents itself before him. The figure is that of an ordinary human, dressed in a suit like a businessman. But the detail is that from the neck up, his head is not human. Instead, it is a small black gas cloud with blue eyes and mouth. He doesn't look aggressive at all, nor does he seek to attack the protagonist. Instead, he appears to be a very polite individual, and has even congratulated him for journeying through the entire tower until the end. His name is Beastrain, the demon, the master of what he calls the Tower of Desperation. Beastrain begins showing images to Jaehwan, taking him through snippets of his recent years, moments he has lived with his friends and with the person who stole his heart, Seoyal. This saddens the protagonist a little, and this feeling is taken advantage of by the demon, who leaves his human body behind, transforming into an amorphous black gas that moves towards him and embraces him from behind, whispering in his ear that if he accepts, he can go back in time with all his memories just before his life took the course it did. A highly tempting offer. Jaehwan considers it for a moment and imagines himself with his girl, enjoying life once again, alongside the rest of his group of walkers with whom he had fought for justice for humanity. Despite his strong emotions, he manages to control them and responds to his host that he has no intention of returning to the past under any circumstances, even though he knows that no object on Earth or in that tower can make it possible. Beastrain says that he is the only one capable of doing it, since the crystal that all the walkers had used during their journey didn't actually send them back but only submerged them in the demon's dream. A dream created by the demon himself. Now the demon tells the hero that he didn't imagine that the human race would be so curious and desire to return to the past so much. So once again, he proposes a deal. He makes an orange screen appear in front of the protagonist, this time asking if he is ready to face the true game now that the tutorial has been completed. Jaehwan uses his finger to select the option no. This leaves the demon perplexed, as he could have bet that Jaehwan would choose to continue with the true game. Jaehwan has been observant and managed to read the name of the tower he was in on one of the screens that Beastrain had placed before him. Now, the protagonist says that he will go after him once this restarts. The black demon tries to reason with the protagonist, saying that his choice is not convenient, and that there is nothing more in the tower after that floor. Jaehwan doesn't believe him and doesn't want to listen anymore, so he launches an attack with his sword, piercing through the demon's smoky head, causing him to fall to the ground. Beastrain mutters curses, but far from feeling pain, he generates a new one. After this, he chooses to send more images of the real world. The protagonist feels confused as he sees several scenes of everyday life that he thought he would never see again, such as a young couple chatting about going to the movies or another group of individuals taking a subway train. Beastrain demonstrates that by choosing him, Jaehwan can return to his reality and leave behind the tower and the fictitious dream world of the dream demon. But the hero is stubborn and obsessed with getting rid of this being. The demon confesses that outside that tower, only a month has passed, while where they are now, decades have gone by. He shows Jaehwan that his body is in intensive care on a stretcher, but his age and physical condition are completely preserved. But even so, Jaehwan has no intention of changing his mind, which annoys Beastrain, who tells him that he won't be able to defeat him anyway, as there is an immense difference between humans and dragons. The protagonist smiles upon hearing this and launches an attack with his classic thrust, saying that he has hunted dragons before. The battle is extremely short, and next, we see the protagonist back in his village within the tower. The first thing he does is head to the blacksmith shop with his friend Jay. The blacksmith's workshop is desolate and abandoned, with dust and cobwebs in every corner. Apparently, his friend has decided to leave or perhaps use one of the dream crystals. Jaehwan is grateful that he had learned blacksmithing in the past and begins forging his weapons and armor to fight against the demon once again. Time passes, and he tries countless times, but the result is always the same. He has never managed to even cause a small scratch on Beastrain. On the other hand, Beastrain is comfortably sitting in his office chair, watching the images of the battles he has had with the protagonist so far. Speaking to himself, he says he had never encountered a product like him before. The demon had gone into debt to buy the tower. In this tower, he had to find a good product to train and then sell to the harvesters. The selection process was carried out through the tutorial, which separated the weak from the strong. Once the worthy ones were separated, they were supposed to be trained to improve their level, and then transferred to another place called the Powerful Land. But the problem with the protagonist was that he wasn't willing to play the real game. Instead, he had made it his goal to destroy the host and owner of the tower. The door opens behind the demon, and behind it stands the protagonist with his sword, seeking to at least wound Beastrain. The demon dodges his attack and impatiently asks him what his purpose is. Jaehwan keeps attacking relentlessly, but his opponent evades every move. However, Beastrain has a limit, and once again, he demonstrates it. He teleports behind our hero and strikes him, burying him against a wall, and leaving him immobile. The demon doesn't understand why this person insists on attacking again, knowing that it won't be the last time. Despite offering hidden equipment, mysterious abilities, and anything else he could give him, the protagonist remains stubborn in his determination to defeat him and move on to the next floor. The man in the suit tries once again to convince Jaehwan to enter the real game and give up trying to defeat him. Now the protagonist says he has a question to ask. This is something new, so Beastrain gladly has him take a seat to hear it, hoping that he will accept his offer. As they sit at the table, Beastrain explains to the protagonist that there is a planet superior to all others called the Powerful Land. From there, different planets and realities branch out. For example, the human's Earth is only called number 294. Jaehwan is angry about why his planet was chosen to have this 100-floor tower planted and to destroy the human race. His enemy replies that it was just by chance, as they are actually seeking suitable people who can overcome the towers and go to the Powerful Land. This raises many doubts in the hero, as there is no logic in taking capable humans to that land. The demon responds that beings like him do it for free, there's nothing motivating them. but his lie is unraveled shortly after he said it when a message from the king arrives. It indicates that he hasn't harvested his product yet, that he shouldn't kill him, and that he shouldn't engage in conversation with him. Jaehwan fixes his gaze on the demon and tells him that he doesn't believe anything he says. Then he launches himself once again into the attack. Jaehwan ends up badly injured, exiting floor 100 through the door that leads to floor 99. He checks his stats and finds that all his abilities are at their maximum level, and there is no way to improve them further. His weapons are the most powerful he has been able to obtain, so he has no idea how he can defeat the demon on floor 100. Suddenly, particles of light in the air begin to materialize in front of him. The warrior stands up and holds them in his palm, stating that these are the essence of his planet. In some way, this matter sparks his interest in knowing more about the king or monarch who has been communicating with the demon. After recovering by drinking a potion, he re-enters the place where Beastrain is. The characters have another conversation in which the protagonist shows more interest in learning about the monarchs. The demon explains that they are the strongest entities in the powerful land and only receive warriors who have managed to surpass the real game. Once this is achieved, those who have surpassed the game have the advantage of choosing a monarch who will act as a sort of mentor for them. Now, Beastrain promises the protagonist that if he surpasses the game, he will use all his power to help him find a better monarch for his new life. Jaehwan surely has a plan in mind that he has not yet revealed, but he accepts what the demon is telling him, although he asks for 10 days of preparation before embarking on the new game. During the next 10 days, the hero has been preparing and training with his sword day and night to stay in shape and further improve his battle techniques. Beastrain has observed everything from his chair, and is bored by how monotonous the human can be. He holds a lot of anger towards the scammers who sold him the tower, which, in a few words, was not of the quality he had paid for. But this would end tomorrow when the hero heads to the real game. The 10th day has passed, and it is time for Jaehwan to depart. In front of him, the usual digital orange signs appear, this time giving notices that seem like a tour guide for the real game. Who are the monarchs? What was the phantom water? Its uses, and even the places he should visit before dying in the game. Somewhat mundane. Now the signs fade away, and a third and final one tells him that the game master has personalized the tutorial, and that he should accept if he wishes to return to World 294 with all his memories and thus begin the real game. Beastrain politely asks if he has understood and memorized all the information that has been collected for him, and the protagonist says yes and thanks him. Now the suited demon kindly requests that he accept the request to start, but in return, he receives a stab from the protagonist. Although it doesn't cause him any damage as usual, the tower's host can feel a strange sensation after receiving that attack. Jaehwan attacks him again while confessing that since the energy particles entered his sword, every time he made an attack, he felt the strange sensation of being alive again, so he repeated it over and over, feeling that satisfying power within him. Beastrain summons a plant that emerges beneath the protagonist's feet, lifting him into the air, and binding his hands and feet so he can no longer cause any trouble. While the demon regenerates from his rival's attempted attacks, let me tell you that once the tutorial is finished, the tower will be permanently erased after 100 days have passed. This leaves the hero perplexed. Jaehwan also has something to say, taking advantage of the fact that the particles of light that appeared to him earlier had provided him with answers to things he would never have asked. He knew that he would be handed over to a monarch, specifically one they called the mathematician. Beastrain is surprised by what he just heard. It was impossible for a human being to have deduced what he was saying on their own. Who the hell was this person? What was so special about them? Jaehwan happily replies that he was the harvest that Beastrain would have liked to reap but no longer is. He then frees himself from the plant's restraints and launches himself at the demon. Jaehwan ruthlessly attacks the demon, who now seems concerned. The cuts he is suffering this time are painful and much more difficult to dodge. Beastrain becomes angry and, shouting the word disconnect into the air, manages to stop the synchronization that apparently prevented him from showing his true power. Afterward, he releases a shadowy beast, a projection that emerges from his body and begins to battle Jaehwan. This shadow manages to corner and hurt the protagonist with its swift attacks. As it continues to humiliate him, it explains that a human will never be able to stand up against powers like its own. Jaehwan observes, thinking that this would be his final fight. Once again, the mystical power of the remaining light on Earth assists him, indicating the weak point of his opponent. Without a second thought, the protagonist launches repeated pushing attacks against the beast until it disappears from the scene. Beastrain has now lost his human form and is merely a smoky ball in the shape of a small dragon, looking up at Jaehwan with sad eyes. Jaehwan tells him that during the countless years he had been wandering in the tower, He had not only battled demons and found lost treasures, but also noticed that certain levels of the tower had walls with inscriptions that provided information about its history. The protagonist had come across one that spoke of a mirage tree, and, connecting the dots, understood that the 100 floors were merely the root of that tree. To proceed to the stem and the true path of this trial, he would need to break through the ceiling of the 100th floor. So, he takes his sword with all his strength and launches himself against the ceiling, unleashing all his power and shattering it. The little dragon that Beastrain had become begged him not to destroy his tower, but it was already too late. As debris fell from above and a ray of light bathed them, emergency alerts were triggered. They indicated that the tutorial had ended and the search for the remaining walkers in the tower would begin to relocate them elsewhere. The system fails to locate any of them and experiences a general malfunction, followed by what appears to be an explosion that leaves the protagonist's vision blank. Some time later, Jaehwan wakes up in what seems to be a jungle, surrounded by plants, trees, and grass. Next to him, the footprints of what appears to be a small creature lead in a specific direction, which our hero is determined to follow. After a while of exploring the jungle he had been transported to, 4 giant and unfriendly-faced wolves ambush Jaehwan and attack him. Our swordsman is already accustomed to violent battles, and this will be no exception. The protagonist easily dispatches the wolves thanks to the power of his stabbing technique. Afterward, a beast twice the size of the previous ones appears and lunges at him, seeking to kill him. However, the reality is completely different. The protagonist manages to tear this bloodthirsty beast apart, piercing it from side to side with his enhanced stabbing technique. Once this final demon is defeated, he arrogantly states that there are no powerful monsters in that area. An unknown language catches Jaehwan's attention as it approaches him. Suddenly, 3 monsters resembling praying mantises with white lab coats appear from behind the trees. Jaehwan doesn't understand their language, although it seems familiar to him, and he tries to reason with them to find out where he is. One of them lunges at his jugular, attempting to cut it, but the protagonist is quick enough to dodge it twice. He then effortlessly deals with them. He leaves one of these 3 mutants lying on the ground, mortally wounded, in an attempt to reason with him and obtain information about his whereabouts. Unfortunately, this last mutant also perishes in his hands, leaving him without the information he desired. Now the hero searches the bodies of these beings for anything useful, and comes across a valuable item called the Spirit Stone. It generates a space of several cubic meters between dimensions where he can store objects that he deems useful or necessary in the future. Jaehwan is pleased with this discovery because ever since he destroyed the roof of the Nightmare Tower, he couldn't connect to nearly any type of interface, let alone his previous inventory. Continuing to search the bodies, he finds several colored stones that turn out to be crystals with different special powers. They are valuable objects, but sadly, he won't be able to store them all due to the limited space. To conclude, the most valuable discovery and what he had been hoping to find since he arrived in this jungle is the map of the area. Upon opening it, he discovers that he is currently in the illusion and chaos zone. This slightly demotivates the protagonist as, according to the conversations he had with Beastrain on the 100th floor of the tower, Beastrain had never informed him about the existence of that zone. So he closes the map and continues his journey. Later, while traversing the jungle, he observes a group of people from the top of a cliff. They seem to be humans who are fleeing while being chased by a demon called Bicorn, whom the hero of this story had already defeated before. Among the group of fleeing individuals is a woman who engages in malicious tricks to delay her companions, pretending to be innocent and apologizing to them. Something is not right with her. The unicorn attacks one of the affected individuals due to a false accident caused by this red-haired girl, and he is about to take his life. But the attentive protagonist launches himself from above with his stabbing technique, impacting the master's skull, piercing it from side to side, and thus ending his life. When Jaehwan approaches the group that had been in danger moments ago, the red-haired girl eagerly expresses her desire to know where he is from, as he had demonstrated his power by defeating a monster that normally required 5 men attacking at once. The girl tells him that in Chaos, where they are now, it is impossible for someone so powerful to exist in the vicinity. Jaehwan tells these people that he is just passing through the area, and thinks it's best not to give any further explanations at the moment. One of the men says it's very strange that he couldn't understand the monsters since there are no language barriers in that land. In the distance, the red-haired girl observes him incredulously and thoughtfully. She can't believe that he gave them the corpse of a bicorn for nothing in return and defeated it without using any special techniques. So she confronts the protagonist, asking where he comes from. But the answer she gets is Chaos, the same land as theirs. This doesn't convince the girl, and she tells him that he must have amnesia or that he was simply lying to them. She had tried to use the ability to reveal information on him, but it couldn't be executed. The girl is named Minora, and the objects they move around with as a group are called the Red Foxes. In the land of chaos, people are no longer recognized as walkers but are now called adapters. A bit tired of the questions the girl is asking, the protagonist unsheathes his spiritual weapon, the same one he had gained in the battle against Velchesis. This leaves everyone astonished and with doubts about whether continuing the conversation could lead to a different outcome. Minora whispers that the Red Foxes might consider eliminating him to possess that weapon for themselves. As nightfall approaches, one of the men in the group suggests resting and continuing their journey the next day since it's much more likely to encounter wild beasts at night. Now everyone disperses in the camp to sleep, although the protagonist keeps his eyes wide open, attentive to the movements of the others. Minora appears running in front of him and tells him to wake up because the rest of the group is coming for them. The Red Foxes encircle them and make it clear that they cannot miss the opportunity to possess that treasure, which is Jaehwan's celestial weapon. Minora tells him to get up and fight because with his weapon, it will be much easier to eliminate them all. But Jaehwan says he needs to wait until he fully wakes up. Now Minora will have to deal with her rivals since it seems she won't receive any help from our hero. But it's all part of the protagonist's strategy to watch her fight and assess her strength. The Red Foxes launch themselves at her, and Minora assumes an offensive stance. In the blink of an eye, she dispatches 3 enemies who were her group members just moments ago. Minora has an ability where she is surrounded by magical fairies that float around her, and are shot at her opponents with extreme precision. The rest of the Red Foxes step back as they witness 3 of their comrades falling in just a moment. Taking advantage of their demoralization, the red-haired girl threatens them, saying that they would all meet the same fate. The leader of the group is not scared by Minora's words and says he has a plan B against her. He grabs his spiritual weapon and considers attacking her. Minora always senses the presence of about 30 to 40 men around her who have come in response to the leader's call of the Red Foxes. The leader tells the red-haired girl that he knows exactly who she is because her attitude of attracting monsters to the place in an attempt to have them eliminate the Red Foxes had given her away. Someone from her group had made a spiritual call and summoned the Witch of the Massacre, and that was Minora. She belonged to the Dark Forest clan, and those who had joined that clan did not roam the same forest area as the Red Foxes. Now that everything was clear, it was time to deal with the witch. Now the master of the Red Fox clan appears before them. His name is Clant, and he wears a black mask similar to Batman's. His muscles are worthy of a bodybuilder, and he has large black claws equipped on his arms sharp enough to cut through anything. He is a level 3 adapter, while the rest of his clan are all level 1. Clant confesses that they have gathered half of their clan to come and hunt down the witch, which makes Minora feel honored. Seeing that her opponent surpasses him in numbers and that these might be his last moments, the witch turns around and hands the young man a return stone, informing him that she won't be able to protect him, so it's best for him to use it to return to a nearby safe fortress. Jaehwan stands up, lost in thought. What would have happened if Jaehwan had possessed that stone before perishing on the 98th floor of the tutorial tower? This motivates the protagonist to join the fight. He takes Minora's number as a sign of support and tells her not to fear, that she won't die today. He then launches himself against the attackers, ultimately ending up protecting her. After disposing of the closest enemies, he goes straight to their leader, Clant, and buries his sword in his chest, ending him with almost no effort. The Red Foxes begin to flee in the opposite direction, completely terrified, realizing that there was no chance of defeating this man. The man who initiated this turmoil kneels before Jaehwan, returning his celestial weapon and apologizing for what he had done. Now that the protagonist has reclaimed his celestial weapon, he performs one of his characteristic stabbing attacks, releasing all the energy from his sword in a straight direction, like a laser cannon, striking down the fleeing Red Foxes. The witch now understands that the power of the person in front of her doesn't rely on any weapon but is his own. With all the enemies eliminated from the area, Minora approaches and asks him to honestly tell her who he is. The protagonist tells her that she knows well who he is, and apparently, the one with amnesia is not him. This doesn't please the witch, but she lets it pass and asks him to return the crystal she had given him a while ago. Jaehwan says he must apologize, but he lost it during the battle. Now the protagonist prepares a campfire to spend the rest of the night while the witch searches the surroundings for the lost crystal, regretting having given it to a human. Ewan interrupts Minora's complaints, pointing out that he has always known who he was. In fact, he had just said it, a human. The girl approaches the campfire with him, and after confirming that she is also human, she asks him an existential question for these times: is it good to be human? The next morning, our protagonists walk together through the jungle. They are heading to a place that the witch wants to show Ewan. But it's true that he doesn't remember anything about the transition after finishing the tutorial and entering chaos. The witch feels delighted for him and his loss of memories and tells him that any inhabitant within chaos would be envious of him for not remembering anything. Ewan doesn't fully understand what she means. After all, he believes there is nothing good about losing his memories. To delve further into the conversation, he asks the girl why she ended up in chaos. Minoru responds that it would be better not to answer that question or explain why people end up in that place. It's not something she would like to know, and in fact, she would regret knowing it. After this conversation, they arrive at Fort Gorgon. Upon entering, the man notices a circle where many people in underwear seem distressed, confused, and lost. This reminds him of the process he and all the humans who accepted the tower's challenge had gone through. Minoru tells him that all those people are dead. They lost their lives in an attempt to defend the human race. Every day, new souls arrive at the place, scared and with no one to explain what is happening. Now Ewan understands why the witch previously told him that he would regret knowing why he was in chaos. Only dead people arrived in this land. In other words, at this moment, the protagonist was dead, or at least that's what the witch implied. Suddenly, royal knights dressed in white arrive at the place to restore order. They start handing out gray tunics to the newcomers in chaos and ask them to form a line as they will soon be taken to the speech hall. Minoru greets James, the superior of this group of recently appeared soldiers. She requests that he allow Ewan to enter the fortress since they are old acquaintances. James explains that unfortunately, things have changed recently, and now he needs to verify the identification of everyone who wants to enter. Minoru doesn't have the document that James is asking for, so she decides to resort to bribery by giving the unicorn horn to the guard. The guard immediately changes his mind and steps aside, allowing the girl to enter freely. Now the royal guard approaches the protagonist, asking for his identification. Minoru says that if he politely asks for help, she will ensure that he also gains access to Fort Gorgon without having the required document. Ewan doesn't seem interested in the idea of having a paper to enter the place. He puts his hand on his sword, implying that he will unsheath it and eliminate all the royal guards. This action alarms the witch, as she believes he is capable of getting rid of all the guards just to get what he wants. Minoru stands in front of James, and just as she is about to ask him to please let Ewan in, a scream is heard in the distance. The royal guards line up, leaving an empty corridor for the most important figure of Fort Gorgon to make his entrance. It is Carlton, the captain of the northern checkpoint in chaos. Carlton introduces himself to them and asks for Ewan's identification to let him pass. He explains that it is necessary because the law must be followed by everyone. Ewan says he isn't interested in identifying himself or obtaining a card to do so. This leaves Carlton intrigued, as he doesn't understand why the law doesn't apply to him like it does to the rest of the inhabitants of chaos. The protagonist has asked for it, so the highest authority of the fortress throws his mystical chains at Ewan, which tightly wrap around his body, rendering him immobile. This doesn't seem to interest or inconvenience the protagonist at all. Without any effort, he breaks all the chains, leaving everyone who witnessed this scene astonished. No one had ever managed to untie or break those chains before. Ewan asks if it is possible to enter a fortress like his travel companion did, through a bribe. Now Minoru, James, and their witnesses are sweating bullets because they know that those words could get them in trouble. Carlton ignores what Ewan says, so the protagonist takes a second action to try to persuade the royal guard without resorting to violence. He throws an artifact that Carlton catches and observes without letting the others who witness this see it. James loses his composure and requests the immediate execution of Ewan for attempting to bribe the highest authority. Carlton asks him to calm down and asks the protagonist if his name is Ewan. Upon receiving a positive response, he informs him that he wasn't expecting him. Now the protagonists go through a brief check of the corruption level of their souls. Minoru's soul has a corruption level of 15, so the guard asks her politely to do what she knows she must do to lower the pollution level of her soul before entering the place. Ewan asks Minoru what this whole soul corruption thing is about. Once again, indignant at her travel companion's ignorance, She kindly explains that the soul of every being that inhabits chaos eventually starts to corrupt just by existing in that place. That's why unicorn horns are so necessary and valuable, as they are used to prepare medicine that lowers the corruption level of an inhabitant's soul. With that said, the witch puts the unicorn horn in her mouth to begin her purification. Now it's time to inspect the protagonist's soul. As the device approaches him, it reacts in a way never seen before, making strange sounds and indicating that it's not possible to measure the corruption level of the subject's soul. Although Carlton and James are surprised by this, the captain decides to let Ewan pass. Before letting him go, he returns the artifact that Ewan had previously thrown as a bribe. They were spectral crystals. Carlton says he won't need them and that he can trust Ewan with their return, as he believes he won't use them for inappropriate purposes. Both protagonists now advance through the tunnel that leads to the fortress. James asks his superior why he returned the spectral crystals to the boy. Carlton responds that those crystals are only suitable for the Green Pyrrhus clan, those monsters who spoke in a language he didn't understand and looked like praying mantises. Ewan had managed to hold those crystals in his hands without being corrupted. This indicated that his spirit was different from the others. That's why Carlton decided to trust him. He then explains that when they measured the corruption level of his soul, the device had shown an error never seen before. This indicated that the soul it was scanning was a pure soul. But they shouldn't delve too much into the matter. Those waiting for them inside the fortress would be the ones to judge them. Once inside the fortress, Ewan starts to believe that the witch is just a nuisance since he can find his way to his destination alone. Ewan asks the inhabitants of the village if anyone knows a good blacksmith who can work on his sword. The protagonist doesn't receive a helpful response. Apparently, no one can help him. From a lower level below the bridge where Ewan and Manhwa were, a person with malicious intentions pays attention to the protagonist's request. Later on, this same person ambushes them along with his 3 brothers with the mission of stealing their spiritual weapon. Ewan doesn't seem worried and attacks the youngest brother, who ironically is 3 times taller than the rest of the brothers despite being only 12 years old. He incapacitates him instantly with a critical hit. The rest of the brothers become furious and launch themselves at him, seeking revenge for what he just did to their younger brother. The battle ends in a beautiful blink of an eye with obvious and favorable results for the protagonist's group. Manhwa feels that her companion only knows the push technique and divides it into 3 phases: soft, intermediate, and hard. She suggests to Ewan that they give each phase a better name and comes up with somewhat childish names that only manage to put the protagonist in a bad mood, so they continue their journey in silence. Later, they arrive at the blacksmith shop Twilight of Twilight, where the witch had recommended Ewan to go. A young man named Dusk comes out of the place and warns them that the work is behind schedule today. They enter, and it turns out that the master blacksmith, Garnard, is inside with his apprentices, trying to pierce a quadracorn horn, one of the toughest materials in all of Chaos. The apprentices have had a whole day off to try to pierce it, but they have been unsuccessful. Now it's Ewan's turn to enter the room and ask for a chance to do it. Garnard laughs while explaining that it's not easy to pierce the quadracorn horn, especially for someone like Ewan who isn't dedicated to the craft during the day. Ewan points with his finger to the spot he is aiming at to make the hole. After this, he gathers some momentum with the same finger and strikes the material, causing it to shatter into hundreds of pieces. Silence fills the blacksmith shop. What had just happened was something completely impossible and never seen before in all of Chaos. Garnard lunges at the protagonist with intentions of attacking him for destroying the quadracorn material that had been commissioned and sold to an important group of people who would pay very high sums for the item. Ewan tells him that now that he has managed to pierce the horn, he should be the owner of the blacksmith shop for a day, just as Garnard had promised his apprentices. He also promises to give him something more valuable than that horn, a pentacorn horn. He delivers it at that moment as promised. The owner of the blacksmith shop asks his disciples to close the doors and invites the protagonist to enter the depths of the best blacksmith shop that existed. Manhwa says that she needs to take care of other matters and temporarily leaves the place. Ewan asks for help in making a sheath for his sword and shows it to the blacksmith, who takes it by surprise and believes it to be a replica of the Ice Dragon sword. But this theory is debunked when the spiritual energy emitted by the sword indicates that it is an original spiritual weapon and not a replica. The weapon comes into contact with the pentacorn horn and begins to emit an aura that signifies it is evolving into something even better. Garnard suggests that he give his weapon another name since that's what is done when they evolve. Ewan takes out another pentacorn horn from his inventory and asks the blacksmith to help him make the sheath since he is the expert. Garnard can't believe that this boy has tamed such a beast on his own, Clearly, this is the only case in all of Chaos capable of doing so. Yuichin Zeber is the Minister of Interior of Gorgon Fortress. He is in his office, drinking a cup of tea and receiving a report from one of his spies, who says that they lost the target once the alley thugs were eliminated. Zeber warns them to be careful and to closely follow him when they find him again. Meanwhile, in a bar, a group of citizens are having drinks while watching a kind of television. The Siren program brings them a very popular video of recent times, showing the protagonist defeating Velchesis. The tavern patrons confirm that something happened in that tower as it has been removed from crops. Another person wonders what happened to that individual after defeating the ice dragon. And finally, someone mentions that the monarchs were very interested in him before he disappeared. As is the case in every society, a rumor circulates in the tavern that the video is fake since no one would be able to clear a tower alone. The door of the bar slams shut, and a redhead woman, attractive enough in the eyes of all the drunks present, enters the place and heads to the bar. When she takes a seat, more than one drunk tries to chat with her but is instantly rejected. This girl turns out to be the witch who was traveling with the protagonist until a few moments ago. She places an invaluable object on the counter and asks the bartender for as many alcoholic drinks as possible to get drunk. After that, she starts talking about her life in the past few days, specifically about Ewan. She says that man drives her crazy with his actions, but not in a good way. He frustrates her, and she doesn't like his personality. The waitress, Claire, who has more of a man than a woman in her, tells her that she's tired of hearing her, and that if that guy is not her target, she should just leave him and focus on another man who surely has many more to offer. Manhwa concludes the conversation by saying that that guy makes her feel something special. Suddenly, a bird of light enters the bar, illuminating every corner. It looks like a joyful phoenix but with a yellowish-white color. It drops a scroll into Manhwa's hands. It was a message from the great Carlton, or at least that's what one of those famous orange screens indicates. But she didn't have time to open it and see what it was about. Someone calls her by her name from behind, and she immediately goes on guard with her magical flying daggers. An old man appears behind her and holds her wrists to prevent her from attacking. Then he tells her that he needs her to do something for him. In the blacksmith shop, a giant monster appears in front of Ewan and Garnard during the material refinement. The blacksmith is completely scared by this and wonders how they will calm down that beast. To understand the origin of that beast, we go back a few moments to when the forging began. Garnard was saying that he was already struggling to keep up with the forging rhythm because his level wasn't high enough. The protagonist tells him that it's not a matter of levels, so he explains the stages of the blacksmithing process to forge a pentacorn horn. Upon reaching the second stage, which was understanding the broken world, the monster appears in front of them, transporting both of them to a different world full of terrifying zombie skeletons that scare Garnard, who screams to escape from that place. Meanwhile, the protagonist fights against the pentacorn. He climbs onto its head, strikes its skull with a stake, and begins hammering near its horn to try to tear it off, automatically exiting the broken world. Now that they have the Karnak horn, Garnard tells the protagonist that he feels too old to handle that horn. Perhaps the true owner of the blacksmith shop, Master Manhwa, could have helped. Garnard feels like a person incapable of doing more for the protagonist. His explanation is that he has managed to master 99% of the weapons that his clients brought for repairs, so he feared not being able to handle that remaining 1% and failing in the process. After a motivating conversation with the blacksmith, the protagonist starts giving a small display of wisdom to channel the spirit's strength for this craft. The other artisans cannot do it because they haven't yet learned the skill of the principle, and without it, it would be nearly impossible to achieve. Ewan demonstrates to the group of apprentice blacksmiths how to see the particles breaking off from the horn. The explanations and metaphors from the protagonist touch Garnard's memory and pride, causing him to react aggressively against the horn, delivering a precise blow and completing what he believed moments ago he couldn't achieve. The next morning, the protagonist leaves the blacksmith shop satisfied thanks to Garnard's work. His jet black, shiny sheath is truly impressive. The warrior follows him and suggests naming his new weapon Lone Wolf. The protagonist accepts and leaves the place, but not before telling Garnard that in the strange world that he alone can see, Garnard looks truly human. This makes the blacksmith happy. Ewan walks through the streets inside the Gorgon fortress. Someone is following him, and he knows it, but he chooses to ignore it for a few minutes. When he thinks it's time to turn around and face his pursuer, he asks why they are following him. Manhwa tells him that she has something for him as a gesture of apology and hands him a sealed package containing clothes. She then asks him what he will do now. The protagonist confesses that despite not being able to meet Manhwa, he will go in search of Michael, and when they meet, he will ask him about the water of fantasy and the path of the abyss. The witch becomes annoyed with him because his intentions don't seem human. She knows what he intends to do and disagrees on every aspect. No one has been able to return from the abyss, so who does the protagonist think he is to do it? She tells him that he should have consideration for the people of chaos because they are also human, although not as strong as he is. Telepathically, MANHWA receives a warning instructing her not to speak ill of the protagonist. Her goal is to lead him to where the person who communicates with her telepathically is through kindness. If she fails to do this, the old woman who had touched her will suffer. Ewan turns around and sees the world that only he can see, where the humans around him are nothing but rotten corpses walking aimlessly without a sense of life or dreams to fulfill. He tells the witch that no matter how many times she saves him, things will never change in that world. Chaos was governed by numbers in a database, nothing more. MANHWA gets angry with him and tells him that things have reached that point. Their relationship has ended because he doesn't seem human in certain aspects. So she turns around and heads to the tavern. When she arrives, she encounters the captor of the barmaid who has a shoe on the hostage's head and threatens to crush her. This hulking man is known as the eldest son of the three brothers. This man asks the witch why she has returned alone and not with her prey, the protagonist. She ironically asks if he had ever seen a witch fulfill a promise. Now MANHWA enters her savage state and takes an attacking position, releasing her magical daggers surrounded by a powerful pink aura against the individuals in the tavern. The henchmen of the three brothers do not lag behind and disperse throughout the entire bar, hiding in the shadows with their abilities. But the red-haired girl is not interested in them. She only attacks the three brothers. She uses her special attack of the 7 swords of Akaram combined with severe cold. It is a very powerful ability that could cause damage to the majority of her opponents, but one of the brothers laughs and says it's a nice trick ironically. He effortlessly destroys the swords. MANHWA knows that she won't be able to win this battle, but the witch is stubborn and will fight to the death. In her mind, an image of Ewan appears, asking her if she would like to go back to the past to change things. She responds aloud as if that moment were happening now, that she would definitely go back and change things from the past. Now she is ready to leave this life. But a light illuminates the battlefield. It's the gleam of a sword colliding with that of the youngest brother and making him step back. The door of the tavern is open, and the protagonist is standing in front of it, observing his travel companion, MANHWA. The witch asks him why he has returned, and he replies that the clothes she had given him didn't fit well. In the midst of the comedy, one of the three brothers interrupts and thanks Ewan for coming to the place and saving them the trouble of searching outside. The protagonist demands that they bring Manhwa in a threatening tone, and he wanted it now. The enemies observe the protagonist and underestimate him based on his appearance. However, they all agree that they want to test how crazy he is. They want to know if the level of madness is really as rumored. MANHWA warns her companion that the enemies they are currently facing are level 4 adapters. The protagonist doesn't seem scared and says he will defeat them anyway. Ewan's arrogance provokes the brothers, and they immediately launch an attack against him. He uses his stabbing attack, but the brother he aimed at manages to dodge the energy beam. Ewan is surprised that he was able to do that, as the only one who had managed to dodge one of those attacks was the 5-horned dragon. But that dragon was level 3, while these enemies are level 4. He didn't quite understand the level equation, so he didn't pay much attention and continued battling. The brothers now step back and showcase Claire, their prisoner. They hit her in the face and challenge the protagonist to attack while holding her by the hair. They don't know Ewan. The swordsman unsheathes his weapon and starts charging his attack. MANHWA hangs onto his arm and pleads with him not to attack, asking him to consider that there is an innocent human on the other side. Ewan sees with his own eyes that there is no human there, he only sees the usual corpses. He then raises his sword, previously named Solitary, and instead of attacking, he releases the energy towards the ceiling, breaking it and generating a signal of light outside the building. Several meters away, Carlton observes what is happening and orders his men to follow him to investigate the place. Moments later, the royal guard enters the bar and encounters a situation where they must intervene. Ewan informs Carlton that the brothers are violating his beloved laws. He cites the verse and article they are breaking, hoping he got it right. Now, the head of the Imperial Guard and the control point of the Northern Gorgon Fortress cites the laws being broken and summons his silver restraining chains to immobilize the bandits and then take them where they will be tried. The burly brother refuses to be caught by the chains and decides to attack the head of the guard. The fight is relatively short as the power of one is incomparable to the other. The physically stronger man ends up on the ground with his hands bound by chains and a luminous blue axe threatening to cut his neck. He surrenders and accepts the arrest. The other two brothers decide to escape using the black clouds, toxic smokes that create a curtain to buy them time to flee the area. Now, these two escapees appear on the tree branches, with one of them not properly wearing the mask and seemingly unconscious from inhaling the black clouds. At that precise moment, the leader of the Forbidden Sky clan makes his appearance. His name is Hyuk Salri, and he scolds the brothers who had just escaped for failing to bring the witch to him as they had been commanded. The subordinates explained to their superior that everything was going according to plan. But unfortunately, that madman named Jaehwan played a trick by signaling a light to the sky, causing the royal guard to arrive at the scene and legally stop them. It had been an excellent maneuver on the part of the protagonist, who resisted attacking and eliminating them, even though it would also mean destroying the hostage. He had done it for his companion, Manhwa. Hyuk Salring smiled and enjoyed what he heard, especially because Carlton, or Pain in the Ass Chains, as he had decided to nickname him, was trapped in the bar inhaling the black clouds. If this were to affect him and eliminate him from the equation, along with his troops, it would be of great help for Hyuk Salring to carry out his nefarious deeds with his clan throughout the fortress. But before they can continue their conversation or make excuses to the leader of their clan, Jaehwan appears through the tavern door, generating a force field to avoid inhaling the black clouds. With his other arm, he holds tightly to the witch coveted by the Forbidden Sky clan. The three brothers on the tree barely have time to comprehend that a surge of energy from the protagonist's sword rips off the top of the tree they are on, so they are forced to jump down. Now, the three of them observe the protagonist from the ground, wondering who the hell he is to withstand the black clouds and still walk as if nothing happened. Jaehwan fixes his gaze on them and then, with the intention of offending the enemy and diminishing their spirits, he calls them the cleaning crew. Now, he is ready to unsheath his weapon and finish them off. And that's how the first part of this manhwa ends. If you have reached this part of the video, let me tell you that you have been one of the few people to make it here. So comment the word walkers in the comments. Remember to subscribe to not miss any videos. With that said, see you in the next video.